Hey, welcome everybody. Let's talk real estate. Your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current commercial real estate market here in Southern California. As we take a no BS look at both sides of the issues driving this market today to find the best solutions going forward. With our man right in the middle, it's Barry Saywitz. Hey, Barry.
Hey, good morning, Paul, and good morning out there to all of our viewers and all of our listeners, and welcome back again. If it's Tuesday, we're talking real estate. It is Tuesday, so we are going to talk real estate. We have a little bit different of a program here this morning than what we would normally do. We're going to do one of our viewer grab bag shows. I'm always excited to do this because we get questions in from our viewers and listeners out there asking real-time, real important questions. We'll try and give them the answers. I am Barry Saywitz, president of the Saywitz Company, managing partner of Barry Saywitz Properties, and we are here talking real estate. And so we're going to get to it. I'm going to bring Paul in, our announcer. Let's go in the grab bag. I see you've got the bag in your hands.
I got the bag, yeah. Ruffle
so
around. Let me reach
we're going to do it old
down
school,
deep in there.
Right, just like bingo, right at the casino. Reach in there, pull out a question, give me my fortune, and then we'll try and get some answers to some of these people, and we'll just get right to it.
Let's pull one out. I actually pulled one in advance because this is pretty timely. Today I saw headlines, as I've seen before. Apartment rents are falling from record highs across the U.S. for the first time in 2 years. I think this was in the Wall Street Journal. I know it was in some other places. So one of our viewers, of course, wants to know the same thing. Is this true? Are rents coming down? And is this a good time to go look for an apartment?
Yeah, and so I would say, and this may be a recurring theme throughout the show today, don't believe everything that you see or read in the news or on TV. I saw an article that they said apartment rents were down across the country, but they were down 1/10%, which is like $1 or something.
Yeah, right.
And so that doesn't mean that
But
the
they're
market's
falling.
Right.
Yeah.
So the good news is, look, the flip side of it is the good news is they're not going up. But the reality of it is I really don't think that they're going down. And if you want to relate that to here in Southern California, apartment rents are not going down. You have a lot of factors that are pushing landlords to want to continue to charge higher rents. Number one is increased cost of utilities, increased cost of trash, increased cost of materials and operations. And then on top of it, you have rent control, which means that when someone does move out, you can bring the rent up to a market number. And so landlords are going to take advantage of that. Now, what that means for tenants is that it's slowing down, so it should get better. It doesn't necessarily mean there'll be more opportunities out there. It just means that every deal that's getting done may not be more expensive than the last one. So I want people, both tenants and landlords, to be realistic about what is really going on out there. And I'm not the sole expert on this, but if you're a tenant and you say, hey, I read in the news that rents are falling, and you go to your landlord and ask him to drop your rent, I think you'll probably get the answer you don't want to hear.
Well, and I think it's, like you said, it's all relative. They may come down from an all-time high, but they're still higher than they were 2 years ago. I mean, we're not going back to 2 years.
You're not. And so the issue is, look, if you're renting, you're going to expect to pay more. Part of that's just a cost of operations. And so people say to me all the time, oh, you own a bunch of apartments, you must be just killing it. We have properties that actually are doing much worse than before COVID, even though the rents are up. And the reason is the cost of operations is up. You have insurance up, you have taxes up, trash is up, utilities are up, pool chlorine is up, fencing is up. I mean, you name it, everything's up. And so the grass is not always greener all the way across the board. If you're a tenant and you're out there and you're looking for an apartment, obviously it's still a tight market. You want to do what you can to tell the best story for yourself. If you get an opportunity where you find a property that's a good deal, jump on it. It's not going to be there forever. If you're talking about renewing your lease with your landlord, then you still want to be realistic about what your options are out in the marketplace.
Does telling a good story help?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, there are many landlords out there that got burned by people during COVID, that lost money, that had people that didn't pay their rent. And the better the story that you can tell about the fact that you are a stable person, if you are, that you are going to pay your rent, that you have the means to be able to pay the rent, that you want to take care of the property, then that's going to make a landlord much more comfortable. And certainly if it's a smaller landlord, a mom and pop, a little old lady, they love that stuff. If it's a bigger company, they'll also appreciate the fact that you've taken the time to do it. And certainly if there are marks on your credit, you're going to want to try and explain them rather than just sort of hope that somebody doesn't read it or brushes over it.
And do you do it in writing? Do you do it
I
verbally?
would. No, I would. I mean, look, if I was a tenant out there in the market today, I would put together a cover letter. I would, briefly explain what it is that I do for a living, what my job is, how stable I am, who's going to live in the apartment, and the fact that you like the property and the neighborhood, if that's really the case, whatever it is.
You plan to stay, and you've got a good credit history and whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, there's no downside.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about an area there maybe is a downside, the small multifamily investment properties. I hear more and more people saying, I don't know if that's really the future. You had a guest in the other day only buys giant properties. Is there still a market for the way you started, little small duplexes and fourplexes? And
Is this your question you're mixing in with the grab bag, or was this
yeah,
actually
this
like
is
a real
Thomas
person?
from Los Angeles. He was
Oh,
thinking
so
about
it's a
buying.
real person.
It's a real person.
And you agree with his question?
I think so. I because I don't know if that's the future. Are we going to just have? Is that the highest and best use, as you always say, to have 4 units on the piece of dirt instead of 400 units?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of the small multifamily property. Number one, you could live in one of those units as an investor and then rent the others out, which is how I got started, and that's what I did. I lived in a duplex. I lived upstairs. I rented out the lower, and that helped pay for the mortgage. So those properties make sense. They're much easier to manage. The financing is much easier on them, and there's a lot less operational expense to take care of a place, whether you live there or whether it's just a small investment. The dilemma in today's market is the barrier to entry into those properties as an investor becomes more and more difficult. Number one, the prices are still very high. They haven't come down. The second is the lending that is out there. There are less lenders willing to make those loans, and the down payment is not 10 or 20% unless you're going to live in one of the units, in which case there is great financing out there. But if you're just going to do it as an investment, you may need to come up with 40 or 50% down, which is a big chunk of change. And then if there's any improvements, you'll have to go fix them up with your own money on top of that. So it becomes more difficult in today's environment. But with the lack of good housing, a property in a good or decent neighborhood is going to do well long term. You just have to be able to get into the game to be able to play.
So do you think long term that's what he's asking? Is this the type of investment he should be looking at?
So long term, I say yes if it's something that you're going to do. Now, short term, you may not get a very good return. Properties that are these smaller, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, 6 units, 8 units. The returns on those are 3, 4, 5%. So if you're okay with that, you're not going to flip it tomorrow in today's environment. That deal's over, and so you want to just keep it and get good tenants where you don't have a lot of drama. If it's the short term, I'm going to fix it up and flip it. There are still a few of those out there, but that market's pretty well driven.
And you just casually mentioned if you are going to live in one of them, do you get better financing?
Oh yeah, much better financing. So look, if you bought a fourplex and you lived in one, you could come up with 10 or 20% down, depending upon how you finance it as a first-time home buyer. And then you would rent out the other units and could probably live there close to rent-free. And look, that's how I got started. So that model still works. But if you're not going to live there, and then you have low rents and a property that's older that needs to get fixed up, and you have to come up with a bunch of money, you got some work to do. There's some heavy lifting.
Okay. Here's another area that I could pick 10 questions out of the bag like this. Lisa from San Diego says, work for a law firm. Our lease is coming up. What do we do? Should we try and renegotiate now? Do we wait till the end of the year? And the question somebody else asked, another one, is do we sign long-term or short-term?
Yeah, so that's a two-part question. For Lisa and the law firm, I would say if your lease is up for anybody really, if your lease is up in 18 months or less, you should be talking to your landlord now and seeing what they would or wouldn't do. I think you'll make a better deal now than you would make later on. I think the office market is still struggling to the point where there's good opportunities out there. And while you could wait and try and hit the absolute bottom of the market, if it started to come back, you would have missed that opportunity. So I say there's no downside to going to the landlord and having the conversation. I would hire a broker and get some professional help and have them help you with that process. In terms of signing the short-term lease versus the longer-term lease, that becomes a business issue. So if you think that you're going to be in business for a while and you know you're going to be around, I would say, depending upon the kind of deal that you make, if you make a good deal, you lock it in for a longer period of time, you will thank yourself later on. If you're not sure about growth, if you're not sure about location, if you're not sure about how your business is going to be, whether it's less space, less people, more people, then you can't sign a long-term lease. I had a conversation the other day with somebody who said to me, well, I don't know, I might retire, so I just want to sign a 1-year lease. And I said, well, you realize on a 1-year lease, you'll get no free rent, you'll get no concessions, nobody takes you seriously, and you realize they're going to be talking to you in 6 months. And if you don't know the answer in 6 months, then you're going to wind up signing another lease, and you're going to want another 1-year lease, in which case you will not get any concessions or free rent or improvements. And if the market does recover, they'll just bump your rent because they know you're not going to move for a 1-year lease. So I would just say, look, you got to be realistic at the same time. While you may not have all the answers to your business, sign as long a term a lease as you feel comfortable doing with your business, and then lock that in.
On the flip side, this is my question. Are you seeing more landlords? You're a landlord. Do they want to sign long-term leases, or do they want to just short-term? Or they got the same questions. I don't know what the future holds.
And again, it depends on the strategy. It depends on the tenant, and it depends on the deal. I would say if I was a landlord and I had to make a deal at a number that I didn't particularly like or wasn't thrilled with, and I thought the market was going to come back in the next couple of years, then I would, just do a 2 or a 3 or a 4-year lease. I would not be doing a 5 or a 7 or a 10-year lease and locking it in. If the deal requires a bunch of improvements, it becomes very difficult for the landlord to spend a bunch of money on a short-term lease. And so they might either just pass or tell you, I need a longer-term lease. On the industrial side, we've heard it from a number of landlords saying, look, I don't want to do a long-term lease because I think the market's still going to keep running up, and I am greedy, and I just want to do like a 2 or 3 year lease because I want to come back and jack your rent again in a couple of years because I think it's going to be even more. And there's no rent control on the commercial side, so I can just make up whatever number I want. At the same time, if you were already getting significantly more than yesterday's rent, and you have a good tenant with good credit, and we've gone through this on several deals with our own clients, Mr. Landlord, why would you not want to lock in this tenant? It's a great number on any day. You might be leaving some money on the table, but the fact of the matter is bird in the hand, and it's locked in. And if the tenant needs a long-term lease because they have to put money into the space, they have to make operational changes and issues and can't do it on a short-term lease, then you have to do what they want, and otherwise they'll have to go someplace else, in which case now you have more costs. And so I think it depends on the deal. But I'm back to if I felt like I made a good deal, landlord or tenant, I think I just want to lock it in and be done.
So it really depends deal by deal how you're going to do this. There isn't sort of one answer or one trend up or down for tenants or for landlords here.
No, get a broker, get some advice. Nobody's got a crystal ball on the market, but you really apply it to your own investment strategy and your own property, whether you're tenant or landlord.
All right, here's an interesting one. We didn't get any other one like this. This is stuck out as I look through the mailbag here. Somebody named Don from Newport Beach apparently has an office building like you do here. And he's thinking of making some additional improvements and upgrades to the property. I don't know if it needs it or if it's just he wants to do it. And he's looking to get a loan from the bank for the money to do that. He wants to know, should I or should I wait?
Yeah, and I guess, again, that gets back to why do you need the money and what's it for? And I would just say, look, getting a loan in today's environment to make improvements to your building, provided that you have equity in the building, I'm sure the bank would give you the loan. You're going to pay more for the loan than you would have paid had you done this 6 or 12 months ago. So maybe you missed the 3 or the 4% interest rate number. But if the improvements are going to add value to the property, then I say go get the loan. If you don't want to come up with the money or can't on your own, go get the loan. And then just make sure that you have the means to be able to pay it back at the end of the day. But there's money out there. And it's not terrible numbers. And in the scheme of things, if it helps add value, I say it's a smart move.
So the two things I'm reading into this are, is it wise to make an investment in an office building that may or may not be leased up right now, or should I wait? Or it needs it, and I better do it now because construction costs are only going to go up.
Yeah, and again, that's chicken and the egg kind of a thing. We have space that is empty. And then you decide, do I fix it up and make it nice and hope that somebody will like it the way I fixed it up? Or do I leave it with yesterday's improvements in there and then let somebody else come in and then they can have a say in what gets built or how it gets done? And that's a function of, what the tenant is. Some people just can't visualize. They walk in and see old carpet and old paint and they go, I don't want it.
Right.
Versus they come in and they say new and they go, this is very nice. I can move tomorrow. or you spend all this money and then somebody comes in and goes, I don't need that wall. I need this and I need that. And then now you're ripping it out. So that's a function, again, on a case-by-case basis. But I think the idea of waiting 6 months to do the improvements, if you have the luxury of time, I guess you could wait. I don't think the cost of construction is going down anytime soon. I don't think interest rates are going down anytime soon. So if you were going to do the improvements now versus the end of the year, I just do it.
And does it make that office market, that office space better on the market? Is yours more likely to rent?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, if somebody looks at it and it's nice and it's ready to go, it's much easier. Again, it's smaller space versus larger space. Small spaces, absolutely. Larger space, tough to do that with because you don't know what the tenant needs.
Right.
And then also, if it's specialty space, whether it's technical space or sort of light manufacturing with office or medical space, those are difficult improvements to predict. And so it's hard to pick what to do and what not to do. It should be nice. It should be clean. It should be fairly ready to go, which I think most people agree with. And then you'll see if you find a tenant what they want or need.
Scott from Michigan, hey, my old home state here, wants to know, do you foresee more investors in California giving up and going outside to places like Michigan?
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen it. Places like Michigan, you get a higher cap rate, higher return, less volatility in the marketplace. Whether it's Texas, whether it's Florida, whether it's Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, Utah even. These are all outflow places from people in California going, hey, I can't stomach it here anymore. Either A, I sold my property and I made a good penny and now I just want to go someplace else and I don't want the risk and the headache of doing business in California. Or I don't want the volatility of the market crashing and exposure, or I don't want all the challenges that California has to offer in terms of doing business here. The downside of going to some of those other markets is you're not going to see the property go up 2 or 3 times in value in a fairly short period of time. If ever, properties in Texas and Michigan will stay flatter and they may go up a little bit over time, but you're not going to make some big hit like you would in California. The flip side is you're also not going to lose or have it go down dramatically either.
You had a guest in here, though, that was predicting oversupply in places like Florida, Arizona, whatever, where there's a lot of land and a lot less regulation. Does that mean that people are going to rush in and build too much, and then that's going to drive the prices down long term?
Yeah, well, look at all of these other states. What do you have? You have land.
Right.
What don't you have in California, particularly Southern California? You don't have any land.
Right.
So again, the barrier to entry and the need and the supply versus the demand are all factors, whereas in Florida or Michigan, you have land, you could just go down the street and build something else. So that's why it keeps the market in check from running up dramatically. That's one of the reasons. And then as new stuff gets built, it also keeps the rents in check, so you don't have these massive run-ups, right? In a state like Michigan, and I'm generalizing, but if you had a $50 or $100 increase in the rent, that'd be significant. And then you come here to California and you have $500,000 increases in rent. When a tenant moves out, landlord makes improvements and gets dramatically more money. So you really have to, again, look at your investment strategy and say, what am I trying to accomplish? I want less headache, less regulation, less drama, less risk, less up and down. I go to one of these other states, it's perfectly fine. And I get a better return, candidly, cash flow. But if I'm willing to play, then you stick with the drama and stay in California.
You had that one guest, and he said he was sitting in a room full of other people like you. I don't know, it was at a conference or something, and they're all bitching and moaning about California and the cost of California and everything. At the end of the day, he said, how many of you realistically are ready to leave? Nobody raised their hand.
Right. So you can complain all day. And there's many reasons that are justified to want to or be able to complain. But then again, if you said, look, do you really want to leave? No, I don't. I mean, if I had my choice, I wouldn't leave. If I felt like the opportunity someplace else was better, I would go. If I was trying to spread the risk a little bit, between California and other places, I would go. If you're somebody who lives in California, wants to feel and touch and see their piece of real estate, going to Michigan doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? So,
okay. All right. Marcus from Los Angeles. Here's one we haven't talked about. This is near and dear to you. He talks about the apartment eviction moratorium extension. Now, here we are looking again at one more pot. We thought this extension was going to be up a year ago, and they keep re-extending it here. Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, well, we could do multiple shows on eviction moratoriums and whether that's good or bad for the overall economy, for the tenant, and for the landlord. Let's break it down in pieces. I don't see personally anything good coming from the extension of the eviction moratorium because you're postponing the inevitability of the fact that there are people that just physically are unable to pay the rent, and there are many people out there in today's environment that are just taking advantage of the opportunity to be able to stay and just not pay their rent, stiff the landlord, and skirt society. And that sounds cold, but what I'm saying is if there are tenants that are truly able to pay, that are trickle paying and can make multiple payments, then I believe any reasonable landlord, myself included, would work with that tenant to try and work something out. No one wants to put anybody on the street, and then it costs money for the landlord. But the person that just says, hey, the mayor or the governor or somebody said I could just not pay, so I'm just not going to pay. I mean, to me, that's not how the world works, and it doesn't make it right. And then the landlord has no sympathy for them at the end of the day. And so they will start to evict. And so as soon as they lift the eviction moratorium, which is only in Los Angeles, not other places, then those evictions will flood the court system. They will go quickly, and then those people will realize they need another place to live. The difficulty, and you've heard the mayor say it in Los Angeles, is she's trying to fight homeless, and she's afraid all these people will become homeless.
Right.
But that might be a fact of life. I mean, those people probably, and not to sound insensitive, should have had an alternative living arrangement worked out months, if not years ago. In many instances, you talk to landlords, and I hear it, that people haven't paid in 2 or 3 years.
That's just mind-boggling.
And it's not fair to society, and then it's not the landlord's responsibility to provide free housing. And if the government wants to provide free housing, they should figure out a way to provide it. But you're messing with the laws of free market by doing this, and eventually it will come back, and there will be a reckoning, and it's coming. And so, you've already seen the eviction moratoriums lifted in many other places, and what happened? The people who couldn't pay, they left. Right? And the people who wanted to stay and fight it out, the sheriff came and said, you have to leave. And then the landlord re-rents it. But it doesn't help the rest of the tenants in your building or in that marketplace because, number one, it's against the laws of society. Number two, what it does is it forces the landlord to raise the rent for the next guy to try and recover the damages and the losses that he's had, which affects the good paying tenants at the end of the day.
And talk about that, because I never hear anybody talk about that. We all know people, we don't know, but if you're in one of these buildings, you know people who aren't paying. And you say to yourself, damn it, I'm paying. It ain't easy for me.
It's not fair. It's not fair.
And
It's,
why
it's
do
no
they get
different.
that? Yeah.
It's no different than the employee who shows up an hour late to work and gets paid for showing up late. It's not fair to the rest of the people that showed up on time. And at the end of the day, that person gets fired, right? And so that might be a simplistic example, but it's just not fair. It's not right. And it doesn't matter whether you're on the landlord side or the tenant side, the people that pay, that's how it's supposed to work, right? I don't know how else to explain it.
Right.
So the simple answer, we could go all day on it. But
You had the Fair Housing Council in here and said the
even
first
they
thing
said the same thing.
The
Right?
same thing. They said first thing is you got to understand, you got to pay the rent.
Right. I mean, so look, if you're not paying, you're going to get evicted. If you're not paying, it's going to go on your record. It's going to come back to bite you sometime later in life. If you don't care about it, then I guess deal with the consequences of it. But having a judgment or an eviction on your record, getting your wages garnished when you finally do get a good paying job, having it follow you around to rent another place, these are all bad things. There's an opportunity in most instances to work something out with the landlord that may not be great for either party, but I just suggest people to try and do that and have good communication. People that are just bad performers, you get out of it, it'll come around. And so I think, look, there's a short window here on the last piece of this eviction. I think they're not going to extend it again. And then I think you're going to see in Los Angeles, everybody jump very quickly to push out the people that are the bad performers. And so, we'll see what happens here, but it's going to happen quickly. And you've already seen it in other counties.
Well, and it creates a false expectation among those not paying that it's gone on for, it wasn't just 6 months, it was a year, it was 2 years. I can stretch this out forever. Yeah.
You got a deal, right? Your deal's just over. That's how it goes.
Yeah. Well, our time is over. Any final thoughts on any of these questions here? There's some common themes here about what's next, and that's the one question nobody seems to be able to answer.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to end on a sour note with the eviction moratorium stuff, but I would say that all of the questions that you've asked me today have a similar theme in the sense that they get back to communication and information,
Yes.
right? And so the common thread here is if you're trying to make a deal, I don't care if it's landlord-tenant, I don't care if it's buyer-seller, I don't care if it's lender-borrower, the fact of the matter is you want to have good communication, you want to have good information, you want to be well poised to make whatever deal it is that you're trying to make, or whatever transaction you're trying to complete. And so go get the information that you need to get educated. Surround yourself with somebody who is knowledgeable that can give you good advice, because the worst thing you could do is see something on the internet or hear something on the news and then take that as gospel, and it's just not the case. And then make smart decisions, both short-term and long-term, whether it's for yourself or your family or your business, and try and be educated about it. I mean, that's the best that anyone can do.
And keep coming back for more, because this is the only source I know locally that tells it like it is, no BS. It's not just your opinion. You bring in people every week, and I'm fascinated by where this is all going, because we're definitely in a point of flux, more than I've seen in many years, and I think that causes fear and confusion and misinformation.
And I'm excited about the variety of the different topics that we're going to have going forward. We have a lot of exciting guests lined up in all of the different sectors of the real estate market. So for those out there, I am Barry Saywitz, president of the Saywitz Company. Keep coming back. Stay tuned. We'll see you back here next week on Let's Talk Real Estate, and thanks for tuning in.
Well, there you have it. You've been listening to Let's Talk Real Estate, your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current state of the real commercial real estate market right here in Southern California. On Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, streaming live from our studio here at the University of California Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.